And I think one beauty of our solution is we do track pretty much all major brands in the United States, which means another advantage we can offer to our clients is when we in conversation with Pepsi, who is our client, we have opportunity to share Coke data. We have opportunity to share Dr. Pepper's data.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the video analytics category. I'm super excited to be chatting with Yan. Yan's the CEO of TVision. Yan, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Well, to give context before we jump into it, we looked at well over 50 companies within the what we call the video analytics category. And one of the companies that really stood out to us was TVision. Not only their approach in analyzing TV viewership, but how their actual approach to collecting data is pretty unique. And that's why not only we wanted to highlight you within our reports, but also feature you at the conference today and for this particular category, because you are the future of TV viewership and analytics. So, and this is exactly why we want to have this discussion today. So before we even jump into questions, I know you have some slides that'll give us, at least the audience, a good visual of who is TVision, and then we'll go from there. Sound good?
Sure. Happy to introduce our company. So, hey everyone. So this is Yan at TVision. So I started the company about 6 years ago. I was a grad student at MIT. We are a VC-backed company. We have office here in the States, but we also have an office in Japan, being really innovating the audience measurement space. So the key concept we really deliver value here is attention. So if you think about the entire kind of the ad tech or the media business, we think this is the typical step ad works, right? So first you have to send ad to the screen, so-called impression. So you get some ad exposure. But the ad must be viewable. So to some extent, that's what Mode, IS, DV did in the last couple of years, which I think is very important, right? Ad got to be viewable on the screen. But also on the other side of the screen, the human or the viewer got to pay attention to the screen, right? Because if the viewer doesn't pay attention to the screen, nobody will get influence, nobody will take action. If nobody take action, nothing can happen, which is not a great outcome for the advertisers spending money on ads. So we think attention is the essential piece to make ad works. And if there's no attention, nothing can happen. And if that's really the important matrix, let's measure it, right? Let's use that to optimize your media. Let's use that to evaluate your performance. I don't think this is like a new concept. I mean, attention has been around as a concept for a long time. What's new here is it's the first time now with all the technology, we finally able to measure attention at scale. I think that's new. So you mentioned we got unique methodology to measure attention. So I think this is a nice graphic to kind of tell everybody here how we do things. So we have 5,000 homes in the US recruited as our panel. So it's fully compensated, fully opt-in panel. And within those panel households, we put our device, which has a couple elements. In terms of the hardware, we have this webcam sits on top of the TV. We also have this computing box, runs all the computing in real time. We process everything on the edge computing side. So we're not saving or uploading any picture or image to the cloud. So everything gets processed on the local device. Then we upload like CSV files to the cloud. At the same time, we're doing a couple other things other than camera. One is we use ACR, acoustic audio, coming from TV to understand what's on the screen. Whether this is Us or Good Morning America, we can tell all of that. In addition, we tap into the home Wi-Fi network. So we understand what's going on those TV connected devices, such as Chromecast or Roku or Fire Stick, etc., which is a very unique capability we have. Then by combining all of this, TVision is able to report the audience attention at second by second, person by person level across, of course, live TV, but these days, more importantly, streaming, CTV, addressable TV, etc. We can report all of this. And we serve both buy side and sell side. So we have great clients like Pepsi, P&G, or Microsoft on the buy side. We also work with really pretty much all major TV networks and most of the major OTT platforms, including folks like a Hulu or Roku or YouTube, etc. So that's TVision business in a nutshell.
Awesome. I like the visuals. Thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to drill into some of those aspects that you actually mentioned. But before I do that, I'm just curious, is there a backstory about why you started TVision?
Sure. Yeah. So before doing this, I was running a small agency back in Asia. And as an agency person, I got to use a bunch of the data source. And because my business was focusing on digital media, I was not like super familiar with TV ratings. But one day I got the opportunity to work with some larger agencies. They kind of pushed me to really get familiar with TV ratings. Then I started to realize it's compared to any digital data we have, this is just completely like a different, it's coming from the Stone Age, right? First, it's not real time. It's like nobody knows how accurate it is. It has many data gap. It's super difficult to get the data, super expensive. The customer service was crap. Then I was not really like comfortable with like going with that data. It's like a TV budget, especially at that time, was like a very large budget. The how come the way we measure them, we price them, we transact them is so wrong from data point of view. So I thought there must be some great opportunities here, and it's good for the industry. So when I went to MIT, I just got to know some great computer scientists, and it's an early day of like an AI technology. Then they told me, oh, actually, I mean, I might be able to build something better than what Nielsen offers. It's like, okay, so that's interesting. Let's do this. So it's really more like a weekend project. And then that's kind of how everything got started.
Incredible. Yeah, it's interesting. And actually, that was one of the things I wanted to dive into is about, there's TV is huge. It's like one of the biggest main content streams, and for some reason, it seems like it's extremely difficult to collect any data related to viewership. And do you have any idea why this has been difficult for a long time, or hasn't changed?
Sure. I think Nielsen has been the currency in many countries, including the United States, for last decades. When you have a currency, you have this network effect. It's very difficult to change the currency. So many companies try to go head to head with Nielsen. They all failed because there's no reason for clients to really switch at all. Until I think for last 5 years, there's a dramatic shift on the viewership from traditional linear TV to streaming. The Nielsen's entire technology stack is designed to track live TV really well. However, 30 years ago, when Nielsen started this, there's no YouTube, there's no Hulu, there's no Roku. So their technology really doesn't quite work for those platforms. As a result of that, the gap is getting bigger and bigger, right? Today, roughly 25% of the time spent on TV is streaming. So if you cannot capture 25% of the market, you're not currency anymore, which creates an opportunity for the startup like us to innovate, to disrupt the market. So I would say it's really just the right timing. We started the company in the right timing, and we also got unique offering, which is not something Nielsen can do, right? So there's a growing opportunity, and we're the only supplier of that opportunity, and that opportunity is expanding quickly.
Interesting. It is, especially as you see kind of the evolution of how content is distributed across a variety of different platforms. I wanted to, what is impressive about TVision is you have this ability to have second by second person level data of viewership. And you talked about earlier that you have these devices that sit in the home. Are these devices your own? And you said that you work with a network of individuals. I'm just curious, why was this the approach? Are there other methods of collecting data that you have? I think you mentioned before that you actually combine the data set you have from the devices with census data as well. How do you even reach out to these people that you want to collect? Is it a good diverse set of audience? Just this big question around data collection. I'm just curious, like what?
Sure.
this process, this whole process? Why and what?
It's very important for us to have a representative sample, and we own the entire process. The reason why is if you don't own the entire process, let's say we license data from Comcast, we license data from TiVo, then we only can have like a TiVo household, which is clearly not a representative of the US population. From the marketer point of view, let's say if I'm P&G, I sell my product to everybody. So I got to understand what's going on with US population, not just TiVo household, right? So that's why we have to recruit the panel by ourselves to make this as representative as possible. We think the representativeness of the panel is more important than the size of the panel. Because let's say you get all the college kids, like a couple million people, but they're all college kids. No matter how many college kids you have, you're never able to understand the behavior of the older generations, right? So having a representative panel is the beginning of everything. And we have many clients, they license data from Vizio, they license data from Comcast, they license data from Comscore. I think that's all great, right? This data all got its own value. However, it's not representative. However, it's not at the person level. So that's why they need to buy our data to improve their own data set. They're almost using our data as the truth set, right? We're the truth set. We're the most representative, most high quality, second by second, person by person data. So it's important for us to maintain a super high quality panel, which means our panel is not going to be like a 1 million people, right? We have 5,000. We may expand that a little bit, but like that's really not our business. Our business is to maintain a small but high quality panel. And that's helping the entire industry to calibrate their data set.
Interesting. Can you give us a kind of an idea of the type of metrics that you're tracking in the home? You know, what are the insights that you can pull for a brand that's say either running an ad or just curious about what is their viewership?
So traditionally, all of them using TV ratings to understand the performance of the show. If the rating is high, must be good show. If the rating is low, I mean, let's get rid of them. So we found that roughly 30% of time when you're running ads on TV, nobody in the room. So if there's nobody in the room, I guess nothing really happened, right? We are not selling product to dogs, cats, chairs, whatever. You've got to have actual human being. Then another thing we found is the ratio of somebody in the room, so-called viewability. There's no correlation between the rating points and viewability. And there is no correlation between the viewability and CPM, essentially price of the ads. So this is interesting, right? So the high rated show doesn't mean you have high attention, doesn't mean you have high viewability. Some low rating shows may have very high attention. Then today the price is tied to the rating points, which means those lower rating shows typically have lower price point. But if you're a brand and essentially just try to get attention, you should think from attentive CPM point of view, right? How much does it cost for me to get each attentive seconds? Then that late night show has like a mid or to low rating actually might be great buy for you, because if you get your target audience, you get cheaper price, you can get tons of attention. I mean, that's good. So essentially we're offering a data tools to provide arbitrage opportunity for our clients. So they can reduce the budget and increase the attention through a much more sophisticated media planning process using our data.
Interesting. Really interesting. I mean, it's one thing to know what shows are popular and where a lot of viewership is, but actually the viewership, the specific ad or brand is it's interesting how you can identify if people's even in the room, even if they're paying attention, even if they're watching for the full 30 seconds. It's incredible. I'm just curious though. I mean, we're seeing, as you mentioned before, how television has kind of evolved now into a variety of, OTT services, and now we have a bunch of different types of devices, tablets, phones, and different forms of content that tends to be a little bit shorter, and a variety of different content and a variety of different devices. I mean, how do you think viewership is going to change and evolve over time? And are you planning, or are you still solely focused on television, and this is, where you continue to see a massive opportunity?
So this might be a bit more US-centric view, but we really think TV as a device will continue to stay at home. If you look at the time spent by device, roughly 93% of the time spent still happens on the TV screen. What's different now is the split between the streaming and broadcasting, or the traditional live TV, is changing, right? So 10 years ago, it's pretty much 100% live TV. Now it's about 70%. Close to 30% of that already becomes streaming. However, the share of smartphone or tablet or laptop really didn't increase at all in last 5 years. You may see the news of TikTok or Snap or whatever. Yes, they're growing, but they're pretty much eating up the share of laptop. So as aggregate, right, all this like a digital platform, the viewership is fairly limited. And we didn't really see a sign of growing in last 5 years at all. And if you think about our industry, what matters here is really the total attentive seconds. So from that point of view, TV remains the most important hardware platform we should measure. That's why we haven't really invested into other platforms. We do have a product, a joint product with Oracle Data Cloud. It's more like a cross-platform product, but we rather partner with other companies who got great data on a smaller screen. But we are not in the business to measure those smaller screens by ourselves, because it's not that important for brands at this point.
Interesting. No, it definitely makes sense. TV is still very dominant in method for consuming content, especially at home. You spend, and I like that slide that you showed at the very beginning when we first started this conversation about how you kind of fit in with the ecosystem. There's the advertisers, and the advertisers actually have to understand, who's actually watching the ads. And I'm just curious, who tends to be the major customers that you work with? Are you directly working with brands, or are you working closer with advertising agencies? Are you working closer with the companies that are creating the content itself, or is it everybody?
Yeah, so I mean, we work with everybody, but our focus here is brand direct. The reason why is, as an ex-agency person, I do understand the agency's interests are not always 100% aligned with their client. It's the typical agent problem. Sometimes going through agency doesn't really help us. So that's why we prefer to work with brand directly. And the other side of the market is TV networks and OTT platforms, so-called media sellers. We also work with all of them. However, by definition, we're only able to serve half of them, because they're only going to use our data when our data shows they're outperforming their peers. And clearly, we cannot guarantee each TV network will outperform everybody else, because by definition, that data is a bit wrong. So always the half of the TV networks like our data, another half think our data is wrong. The way to fix that issue is to get as many brands as possible. When P&G goes to ABC Disney, goes to YouTube, it's like, okay, I think attention is a good matrix for us to measure. Then they have to improve the attention instead of arguing about which matrix we should use. So that's why we always think the brand as the most important client segment we have in this marketplace.
Interesting. I'm curious, how far do you go with helping a lot of your customers or in brands? Is it, here's how well you're performing, here's every metric that you need to know across a different variety of cohorts, and that's up for you to decide how you want to change your ads or you change your content? Or do you guys continue to either plug into ad ecosystems, or do you tell what brands should be doing differently about what their either content is that they're showing or where they're placing their content?
Yeah, that's a great question. So by the way, I'm ex-McKinsey consultant. So I have seen through the good and bad of the service business. We're in a scalable data business. We really try to avoid touching any service or media transaction business as much as possible. So sometimes we do a little bit of kind of educational service, but the purpose here is try to educate the market on how to use our data. We don't want to become a company to help our clients to use our data. We just want to supply the data. So in that sense, agencies are a great partner, right? Once we're able to convince brands to use our data, on day-to-day basis, we pretty much work with their agency partners because agency are making all this transaction for brands, and we do work with agency a lot in that capacity. However, we are not in the business to make actual changes of the media planning or media buying or any type of the negotiation or actually purchasing media. That's not our business. We just supply data.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And I'm actually just curious. I don't know if you can provide insight on this, but when brands don't get enough attention or viewership as they'd like, from your perspective and the seat that you're sitting in, is it traditionally because they just have poor content, or is it normally because they just in the wrong time slot or working with the wrong network, or what tends to be the problem? I'm just curious.
That's a very classic topic because the media agency always blame the creative agency. Oh, it's creative sucks, right? We did amazing job. The creative agency said, no. My creative won a Cannes Lion award, and this is the top designer, whatever. It's a media sucks. That's why there's nobody seeing my creative. Nobody able to solve this issue, right? For last decades. The beauty of our solution is, for the first time, I can separate these two issues. I can tell my brands, hey, the reason why this campaign didn't go well is because of your creative or media, or maybe both, right? I can really break down why it's not working, which I think it's important, because if you don't know which piece is not working, you're never able to improve, right? So I think there's a famous quote that I know half of the ads that doesn't work, I just don't know which half. So if you don't know which half, then it's difficult to make improvement. But I think here we're in the business to really use our data to tell our clients which half didn't work, and the clients can use that data to improve that half to really improve the ad performance.
Really interesting. You probably save a lot of headaches and fights between different business units or, a lot of your customers. One of the things I did want to highlight that I thought was really cool, and I just want to highlight it, was you have a really cool chart on your website where you actually rank brands based on their viewability and how well they've performed. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I just wanted to share that with the audience. You should definitely go to TVision's website and check it out because it's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think one beauty of our solution is we do track pretty much all major brands in the United States, which means another advantage we can offer to our clients is when we in conversation with Pepsi, who is our client, we have opportunity to share Coke data. We have opportunity to share Dr. Pepper's data, which Pepsi obviously are very interested in learning what's the strategy of Coke, what's the strategy of Dr. Pepper. I think that's another interesting stuff to own the full tech stack and our panel, because we own the data, right? When we are not licensing data from other folks. So we have the rights to share data to any of our clients and any of our data. And the so-called this competitive intelligence is another very important piece of our business to tell our clients what's going on in the market, not only their own brands, but also the entire industry and their key competitions.
Really interesting. It's especially because it's your data set is constant. It's growing. It never stops. It's not like I'm assuming it's not like when someone asks you for data set, you turn the devices on. You have this constant feed of how consumers across cohorts are consuming content, and it's really impressive. I'm curious because you are a data business. What is this? What is that relationship with brands? Is this? You talked earlier, you're not in the service model, you are business. Are you licensing out your data?
Correct.
Okay. And is
it's a data license business.
Gotcha. And it's based on quantity of data, or is it based on a certain breadth of insights?
Yeah, based on two factors. One factor is how large is a brand media spend. We think it's fair to charge more if you're a huge brand because we're going to generate more impact. So that's one factor. The second factor is the kind of the functionality of our data. So our data can be used for both creative and media. Within media, you can use our data for campaign tracking or media planning. So it depends on how many different use cases you want to unlock. The price does change a little bit.
Sure. Makes sense. We touched on this a little bit earlier, and now I'm switching gears to a little bit more general market questions, just because I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. We talked about how content is evolving in a lot of different ways, and it's catering to either whether it's shorter form content or, the social networks are trying to take in, a lot of attention in different ways. And you see this dispersion of content creators. So it's not just big brands. But you mentioned earlier that it's really not making a dent in television or traditional OTT services, and especially for brands, this is it's will and continue to be the main outlet. And I'm just curious, is that generally how you vision that ecosystem? It's TV is here and it's going to stay, and it's not like it's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, I think ultimately we got to follow the consumer behavior. There's no indication in the United States of people moving away from TV. What's changing is the shift to streaming, but that's still on TV, right? Like if you think about it, when you watch a movie on Netflix, are you going to watch it on the big screen in the living room, or you're going to watch it on your phone for 2 hours? So usually that's the big screen. What you're going to watch on your phone is like a 3-minute clip on YouTube. Yes, you're going to watch that on your phone, but the 3 minutes is a short amount of time. And you have to watch like a 40, right? 43 minutes clip to reach one movie. So that's why in terms of the session times, those smaller screen does have many, many sessions. For example, Snap, that's 6 seconds. Now, of course, you're going to watch tons of the video. But when you aggregate, it's not a huge amount of time. And brands are only waiting to pay when they got enough attentive seconds, which means from that point of view, TV remains very important. And the smaller screen at this point, it's not a huge platform from video advertisement point of view.
Makes sense. I know you highlighted how the US market is not necessarily changing. Do you guys have operations abroad? And do you see something entirely different about how users interact with TV?
Yeah, we do operate in Japan, India, and India, I think, as a good example of emerging country. In the emerging country, I think the smaller screen is more important because in many cases, they don't have a big 4K fancy screen in the living room. In that case, then if you have a smartphone, then that becomes an obvious choice for you to stream the video, right? Then the interesting question is, as those emerging countries become more wealthy, will these people buy big screen and watch TV more? I think that's something we have to observe. But what I just mentioned, this like a big TV phenomenon, is true in pretty much all developed countries, including the US, Canada, most of the Europe, Japan, etc.
Interesting. So for your operations in India, what is your method of collecting data from representative consumers?
So in India, we have the similar methodology. So we are not really measuring smartphone or other smaller screens. And if we see that it's a growing trend to stream more video on those smaller screens, then certainly we should put that on the roadmap to figure out some way to measure those smaller screens by ourselves. But right now, we haven't really prioritized that stream of the work yet.
Sure. No, it makes sense. And I agree 100% with you. I think that there's, if you don't have a TV, eventually you'll get one and it's not going anywhere. And people love TVs. I'm just curious. I have 2 more questions. First question that I wanted to ask you, and they might be related, but has the pandemic at all affected your industry?
Initially, I would say yes. And if you look at the ad revenue, it's declining as an industry. So that's certainly a challenge. in addition, I think many brands now, they have the budget freeze, or they have much shorter budget cycle. Instead of annual budget cycle, they have maybe quarterly or semi-annual budget process. So that's a challenge. But I think it also creates opportunity. For example, streaming really exploded last year. That gives us opportunity to really push our CTV solution more. So that's opportunity. Another opportunity is because they all have limited budget. So now how to make their ad dollar work harder become a more important subject, right? So there's some opportunities. So net, I think it's okay. I think, especially for TVision, as an industry, I think it's still challenging.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And last question that I wanted to ask you is, where do you think the future of TV analytics is going? And what do you see that most people don't?
I think the media environment becomes so complex, and the priority of different brands are also very diverse. As a result of that, it's difficult for me to believe there will be one single currency going forward, like Nielsen. I think Nielsen data remain very important for our industry. However, I do think that there'll be other data providers or analytics company emerge in the space, become an important element of this ecosystem. And obviously, we believe TVision will be part of that. I think that going forward, there'll be multiple companies play important roles to measure and to help brands to make the right decisions in terms of the media planning or the creative effectiveness.
Awesome. Well, with that, Yan, thank you so much for taking the time. This was awesome. It was remarkable. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and thoughts on TVision. And I'm happy that we got to highlight what makes TVision so unique. And not only your method of collecting data, your process of how in-depth you can get with, being able to answer probably one of the hardest questions, especially for brands, is, especially for the content that they're creating. Is it just in a poor spot, or is it, the content itself? And to seeing and to having your standpoint and knowing that, TV is huge and it's going to stay, it's not going anywhere. And even regardless if they're switching from, over to the streaming services, there's still a massive opportunity for a lot of brands to participate in television. But in a much better and more impactful way that makes sense, because now they can actually see who's actually watching their brands and live. So really impressive. Before I close out, was there anything that you wanted to add or ask of the audience or mention before we end the interview?
No, I think TV measurement has been kind of very stable industry for quite some time, but now I think it's getting exciting as people changing their audience, like a viewership behavior. So it's getting really interesting. So if you are interested in learning more from me, I'm happy to chat more.
Awesome. Well, again, Yan, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the conversation.